that many do not know. In our 3-part documentary series, we'll cover a brief history behind Hettinger Public School. After conducting our interviews and research, we have discovered we'll only be able to scratch the surface on our mini-series. The building of the school has evolved over the years. It has grown from a 2-room schoolhouse to a large complex, which has too many stairs. We will begin our next section with Lauren Luckow, who was the business manager at Hettinger Public School for many years.
My name is Lauren Luckow, and I previously was employed by the Hettinger School District from 1978 to 2012. 36 years as the business manager of the school district. Well, obviously school was important. The town was founded in 1907, so immediately there was an effort, this block and be a block, no, actually be more than a block and a half, because it goes all the way to the alley in the other half. So that was dedicated for school district purposes from day one when the town was founded and the lots were sold. Based on the postcards that I've collected over the years, my guess is that we started with a 2-room schoolhouse. Although there is a picture of a 1-room schoolhouse, indicates it was Hettinger, North Dakota. But when I look at the other picture that shows a 2-room schoolhouse, I'm convinced we probably started with the 2-room, but not guaranteed. So that's where we would have started, and then we used the basement of the Congregational Church, which was right across the street to the north, and used their lower level then to accommodate classroom space and so on. And then in 1909, the board signed a contract to build a new public school building. So that was completed in 1910, I believe. So that's why it's called the 1910 edition. By 1916, we'd outgrown that facility, and so they doubled the size. They added on to the north side of the original school building, and the north side included the area with the stage and the, what did I call the other room?
Are you talking the big gym?
The assembly, yeah. It was the assembly area.
Yep.
Yeah, and then they also had a stage for plays and that type of thing. So all of the public events, the concerts would have all been held up in that facility.
Well, first of all, the old school was pretty cool. It had, like I said before, it had a gym in the basement. It had auto in the basement. We had a pottery class. I remember going down the steps, and there was the social studies was there. And then on the second level was like the Englishes and the maths, not very important classes. But then on the top it was pretty cool. There was an auditorium, we called it, and we had like 100 to 200 desks, and at that time they would have plays and different things in this. They called it like a study hall or an auditorium. I can't specifically remember. But I do remember that the principal's office at that time was right behind the stage. And some of us spent a lot of time in the principal's room. But it was a cool school. Still today, it would be a cool addition. It was old, but it had a lot of character.
So our next building project would have come along in 1951. The current gymnasium and the 6 elementary classrooms that are attached to that would have been built. And again, the enrollment kept increasing, and so in 1954, they added a 2-story addition that connected to the elementary wing. And then in 1967, the high school addition was completed. And the first class to graduate out of that addition was probably the class of '68. And the swimming pool was also included. That became a community project to raise money, and as long as we were building the school, it seemed like the right thing to do, rather than go out and build an outdoor pool. We had one of the first indoor-outdoor pools, they called it, because we had the patio area out to the south there. And then the fire came along in 1980, middle of May 1980, and it basically destroyed the 1910 and the 1916 edition?
Well, first of all, it was in 1980. I was an 8th grader, and I was sitting at home eating supper, and my sister came and said that the school was on fire. And I thought, well, she's crazy. So we sat there and we finished eating, and then pretty soon we looked out and there was a little bit of smoke. So my dad ran over to the school, and at that time it was 3 levels, and in the basement there was like an old gym, a pottery class, the auto shop. And what had happened was there was a student that had taken one of the garbage bags and put in one of the janitor's closet and then jimmied the door shut. And then so it started from the bottom and it worked its way up.
It was a rubberized floor in that assembly area, so there's a lot of black smoke when that was on fire. But it burnt through that floor, so then it was burning underneath. So the water really had a tough time getting to the actual fire, and so it caused lots of damage. So
I remember that, my dad coming over and said, yes, it was on fire. No cell phones, so we called the sheriff's office. We didn't have 911 even at that time. So we called, and then all of the participating surrounding fire units came. And the biggest thing I remember was the ladders that were extended, and all of our firemen breaking out the windows and trying to spray the water inside of the school. All of the students sat around the school and they watched it burn, and it was about 2 weeks before school was supposed to be out. So my 8th grade year was cut 2 weeks short. The teachers at that time had to go into our lockers, and they put our stuff that was not damaged into black garbage bags, and we came to the school, to the big gym one day, and we picked up our bag, and that was it.
So after that, then we did maintain the original power plant, which is that little gym area. We just put a roof over the top of that. So part of the insurance money, the Delmer Swyhovic's shop area was down in that little gym area at the time of the fire. And so with the insurance money, we didn't need more space. We figured we could get by with what we had. And so that's when the T&I shop was built with some of that insurance money.
Okay.
So.
Okay. And that was the last major reconstruction that we've had.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we made some building improvements, like replacing the glass block. The whole south side was a lot of glass block, which was it was a conductor of heat in the summer, but wasn't very good in the winter time. So most of those windows in the 67 edition were replaced. That would have been in the early 2000s, I guess. Okay. Somewhere's in there, middle, yeah.
Wasn't there some asbestos you guys had to replace during the 67?
That was in the 67 edition, yeah. They came along, and the floor tiles were asbestos, the ceiling tiles were asbestos. And so basically that project started, I guess, once school was out in the summer, they came in and they closed off all the hallways and took down all the ceiling tiles and bagged them, and they went to the landfill. And that was less than $100,000, but I think of all the schools in the area, we spent the most removing asbestos. And then the superintendent, myself, several staff members, we volunteered to put the new ceiling tile in. So that was a kind of an evening project, until we got it all done. But so we didn't have the cost of labor. We were all willing to try and save that at the time. But and I said, then the ironic thing is that the new tiles came from the Celotex company.
The same company
the ones that screwed us over the first time.
Okay.
Now that we know a bit of our past, what does the future of our building look like? We talked with Mr. Moser, our school superintendent and elementary principal, to find out.
Okay, so Hettinger Public School did a bond, which means we went to the public to get more money to redo the swimming pool, actually a complete redo of the swimming pool. The other ones are new boiler systems. Our boilers that heat the school are outdated. So it doesn't sound exciting, but for me that's exciting infrastructure. We also are going to be redoing some roofs on both elementary buildings. There's also a possibility of redoing the windows on the north side of the school, as well as some sidewalks. It all depends on what the bids come in at. So those are the projects that are on our radar. There's other projects that we're looking at with bell systems and speaker systems that we're going to use some of our ESSER funds to try and address that.
The school's sports program has been something for the school to root over the year. And you'll discover in this section that the Nighthawks have not always been the Nighthawks and much more. Our school has had sports programs since the early 1900s, and they have been evolving ever since then.
Well, regarding starting with mascots, in a 1927 or 28 yearbook, I found that our basketball team was called the Gold Bugs at that time. So that's the first nickname that I came across. So again, I cannot date the shooting stars. My guess is that it maybe came along in the 40s when Willard Solberg got here. I guess I'm not sure. And then we were the shooting stars in basketball and the Black Devils in football. I just showed you pictures of the football team back in 1912 or whatever. So early on, we fielded a football team.
My junior high football year, I remember that we would practice where the museum is. And the museum was added on many times, so my 7th grade year we practiced there. The high school at that time, they would practice out by the Schwann's building or the city building, so the kids would they would drive their cars out there and then they would practice when I was in junior high. The games that used to be played were two places. They were down at the rodeo grounds, we called it at that time, and then at the baseball field. So the football games would be played there, but in, I don't know, 72, 73, somewhere around there, we went to the first football game. It was pretty cool because we all walked down to the football game together. And I remember that. But I remember early on, the first time I went to a football game down at our new football field. We got out of school early. It was like a 2 in the afternoon game, and we played Belfield. We didn't have any lights yet. My 8th grade year, we finally then did go down to the field because the softball fields were just starting. The bad thing about that was there was a lot of bad grass. There was piney. It was like rock. And I still remember going home one night and I complained to my dad because he said, well, then don't get tackled. You know, so there wasn't a lot of compassion there.
Up until the class of 65, 66 is where they took the vote. And I think the High School Activities Association had encouraged us to have one nickname and logo. And so 70% of the student body voted to drop the shooting stars at that time.
Growing up in Hettinger, of course, it was the Black Devils. Very, very prominent Black Devils across the board. I remember a time where we had you know, the people dressed up in a Black Devil type outfit, and kind of over the years there was always this kind of that scuttlebutt of rumors where, you know, people with some of the mascots that we had, where some of the people didn't necessarily think it was a school appropriate. But yeah, definitely Black Devils. You know, growing up as an elementary kid and even in high school, we had very strong athletics, whether it be football, very competitive on the regional level. Basketball, you know, we had basketball teams that were making it to state and doing well, girls and boys.
And the ladies basketball went by the wayside. I'm not sure when or why. You know, maybe World War II brought all that on or whatever. I just don't know. And so girls basketball was out of the school again till in the middle 70s about. That's when the girls basketball came in. And then girls volleyball came along too, added another sport for the girls. Another coach that I remember is Chuck Thorstensen. He was the biology teacher and assistant football coach and so on, but he's the one that started the wrestling program in 1959. Knew nothing about wrestling, just got it out of a handbook or whatever and recruited a bunch of guys, and there was just one division then. It didn't matter whether you're big school, small school. You competed against the Bismarcks, the Fargos, whatever. And later on, it was subdivided then, so the Class B schools would have their own state wrestling tournament. But one of the biggest accomplishments that ever happened in sports in Hettinger High School was in 1966. We won the state wrestling championship, and we were Class A at the time. So we beat out the Bismarcks, the Fargos, the Minotts. A real accomplishment. It got down to the last match, and Walt Gibrat won his match, and that gave us the title.
Where did they have wrestling at the time? Where did they actually practice?
Well, when that sport, there was no separate space like Mr. Burwick has now. Yeah, so they wrestled on the stage at the same time the basketball team was practicing in the gym. So every once in a while, curtains would open, they'd look out on us and whatever. So yeah, and he had some good, not a big area to practice in. They couldn't get a full mat like they do now.
No.
But later on, then Mr. Burwick moved into what was the machine shop. When this 67 edition was built. And since then, I guess I got to give credit to Randy Burwick. He told me he's been here 31 years.
He's kind of the one that I remember. I think I was a fourth grader when Mr. Burwick came in with the wrestling. And of course, he's still here today. He's made a very good program, one of the best in the state.
And obviously, he's had many individual state champions. They won the overall tournament, the individual title several times. They won the dual tournament a couple times after that started.
I landed a job in Caldwell, Idaho, and I was actually just in the process of leaving my house when a friend of mine, a former wrestler that I had, and Chuck Seamands gave me a call and said, "Hey, Coach," because I had coached him in college, and he said, "You should apply for the job in Hettinger." And lo and behold, I did. I made a phone call, and lo and behold, I did, and that was in the fall of 1990. And Mr. Rasher and Mr. Berkeley, I interviewed with them, and I guess what they say, the rest is history. I've been here ever since. So
he's been here 31 years, and obviously he's had many individual state champions. They won the overall tournament, the individual title several times. They won the dual tournament a couple times after that started. So I think we only missed 1 year of not getting into that dual tournament since they started that. So yeah, Randy's done one heck of a job for the wrestling program. So
the co-op. So at the time when we co-opted, I was the counselor. So as far as like any of the administrative decisions and stuff, I was not a part of those discussions, but I was lucky enough to be coaching some of the first sports, track and field. I was coaching with that, and at that time also I was coaching junior high football. So from a coach standpoint, and then as a staff member standpoint, the co-op, I believe, came about. Scranton at that time, I believe, changed the co-op that they were with. And they were looking for some partners for co-oping, and with us being as close as we were to Scranton, and actually having kids from that Western Adams County that go to Scranton, I think it was just a natural fit, where both schools started to talk and said, hey, would you be interested in doing some of this? Rolled it out in a couple of the sports where the administration at that time felt it would be an easy way to kind of get things started and still allow some of the sports where there was still good numbers for participants to maybe stand alone for a while, so Scranton could still have some of their standalone minor stuff. We still had some of that Black Devil stuff where we had strong numbers. and it kind of just try it out in track and try it out in that junior high football and see how it goes. And it went really, really well. And then, of course, we turned into the Nighthawks, to try to build that unity between the two schools. And that was a hard decision, I think, for everybody that was involved. And I know that there's some alumni that was a hard decision for that were Black Devils, myself being a Black Devil. But it was also, a lot of people saw what it would be good for our youth. And that's kind of what it came down to is how do we help keep these programs going and make it so it's competitive, right? I mean, sports are fun, but they're more fun when you're competitive. So it's been a great co-op. I think the kids have liked it. It's had some ups and downs along the way, but that's sports. Who's on varsity, who's on this. But overall, I think it's been a great mesh, and obviously been very successful as Nighthawks too. So
one of the things I want to say is that, as far as a small community goes, there are high expectations in Hettinger in everything we do, whether it's academics or athletics. The community really is second to none in support. They are behind every program that we have. They are willing to step up and help at a drop of a hat. I'm not going to say that there's not, misunderstandings and arguments sometimes, but as far as what the community of Hettinger does for our student athletes, I don't know. I visit with a lot of coaches in the state, asking them how their support is and what they get from their community, and I'm extremely thankful for what our community does for our kids. And like I said, they'll step up at the drop of a hat to help out any kid that's willing to try and get better and to be better, to be the best version of themselves.
Besides for just sports, the school has many extracurricular activities such as the arts. Music and drama have both been a part of the school's history for many years. Band and choir usually does performances in the winter and spring, while the drama department performs plays in the fall. These programs provide more opportunities for students to develop skills that they would not have learned otherwise.
And then Norm Smith came along in about 1960, retired in '88. Spent many years as our band and choir director. The outstanding achievements, our students won many awards, in the area and at state competition. And then he became the junior high principal and served in that capacity his last years then. And I think he might have done in later years, maybe like the kindergarten music. He loved the elementary kids and whatever, so that was his position. I started as junior high principal, but I was thinking that it was elementary and junior high later on, but okay. He gave us a lifetime.
Growing up in the 90s and stuff like that, we were really strong in both of those departments. Looking back now, the music, everybody did it. At least everybody tried music on the high school side. We had Mr. and Mrs. Morey. Mrs. Morey did the elementary music program, of course, husband and wife. And at that time, you didn't realize how much they were building the program. Looking back now and having some coaching experience, it's like, boy, what a coaching tandem having Mr. and Mrs. Morey. But she set you up really well in elementary. And like I say, Mr. Morey had great choirs and bands for year after year after year after year. The early 90s, we were the governor's band, I think 90, 91, somewhere in there. And then constantly doing well at state and regional festivals. So our music department was very strong. And like I said, what I liked about it too is whether you thought you were a jock or whether you thought you were someone academically that was going to do well, everyone was expected to try music, at least try it, and no one gave anyone a hard time. It was like, hey man, why aren't you in music? Why aren't you trying an instrument? something I'd like to see back again. You know, it's like everyone needs to at least try it. You know, if you don't want to stick with it because it's not for you, but try it in the junior high, high school level, because it's a different ballgame than in elementary. So, but they did a great job. I know like Mrs. Joyce came back years after that and did a great job with our music program. You know, had some teachers in between that were here for a couple of years and then went on to different areas. You know, had Miss Hicks the last couple of years, and she's kind of taking a different route right now. So, you know, right now in 2021, it's a kind of a crossroads, I think, for our music program. It's like, where are we going to go? How are we going to build this thing? How are we going to keep it so we can continue to be strong and compete, and the kids can have fun?
The music and drama history, they have always been very strong. We definitely have some very talented kids here in Hettinger for both the music side and the drama side. I mean, obviously our numbers, they always fluctuate. You never know what you're going to get, but we're a small town, so it's one of those things you expect. When I was in music here my freshman year, there was a lot of larger upper classes, so we had about 30-40 kids in our band when I was a freshman. But then those larger classes, they graduated, and then we got down to the 15s, the 16s as our largest class sizes. So that's kind of when you see those numbers kind of go down a little bit because people graduate. It's one of those things that you expect. But our program here, I definitely say Hettinger has a strong program. We have some very talented students here.
What about Bonnie Smith?
Okay, well, and I'm not sure how many years. Norm came here in about 1960, I guess. And Bonnie was a year older than me, so she would have graduated from college in '63. So that's about when she got here, maybe. Okay. I don't think she taught any other place. But you know, Bonnie created a great track record in both her teaching English. For years, she taught some college courses when those first became available. Speech and drama. She won all kinds of awards at the state level, you know, with the plays. Won it several times, and always, well, there's a sign at the west end of town, I think, that shows some of the accomplishments. But yeah, she was awesome in both the speech and the drama areas. Retired, and she received there's a plaque, I think, in the hallway. She was North Dakota Teacher of the Year, you know, which is quite an accomplishment. You know, you're up against a lot of good teachers, and she made it to the top. So
the best one was to have Bonnie Smith, who of course I couldn't replace her, but she did all the 1-act plays, 3-act plays, and everything for the history of this school. We were #1 for years, or #2 for years in our region because of her and because of the work she developed. She didn't do speech, but her husband, Norman, was unbelievably wonderful with helping her with her practices, with the blocking, with stage design, set design, music, everything else.
When you have teachers that stay in the building for that long and then work as hard as they did, you're going to have competitive stuff. And that was the same with Mrs. Smith with the drama, whether it's 1-act play in the fall. Again, no matter what you were into, whether you were into sports or you were into Science Olympiad or whatever, again, you were expected to at least try out for play. Not everybody might get in, but you were expected. It was like, hey, why aren't you doing that? And then, of course, what was nice with Mrs. Smith is there was always that spring concert or a spring play. So she always did a spring play for the community. So you were able to get the kids involved that had a want that maybe weren't able to be in 1-act play, but you could always be in that spring play. You know, so she did a great job of getting the kids involved, whether it was on stage acting or on the floor acting. A lot of the plays were on the floor of the gymnasium. And then, of course, getting the kids active that didn't want to maybe act, but they were active in behind the scenes, stage hands and stuff like that. So very, very strong program. You can go up to the trophy case today and see, I mean, numerous state first place, second place, third place. You know, like I said, I would argue that she probably has some of the best winning percentages as a coach, possibly in the state.
People tell us all that we probably should end up doing the things that we enjoyed the most, that we thought were easy, that we thought were just fun. And that's really what my career ended up being, and I am very, very grateful to the... One time I figured out it would have been over 5,000 students that I had come in contact with, because when I first started teaching, I had 30 students in a class for 6 hours in a row. We were on a 6-hour period at that time, 6-hour day, and there would be 30 different kids in each of the classes in that range. Sometimes it may have been 28. Once I think it was over 30, but the school is very large, and I was scared to death that I was not going to do well. So I would come back here and study till 2:30 in the morning, hardly sleep, and get up and go back to school. I don't know if I was very good that year. Some students have told me I was, but I felt as the years went by that I should have paid the school for the first year. But Mr. Rinke believed in me, and Norman believed in me, and the kids helped me out, the students helped me out. And when I speak of them as the kids, I mean that kindly and with great humility, because they became my kids. We had 2 biological children of our own, and of course they were and still are very special, but my kids were the kids I taught. And we had some fantastic experiences over the years. It's hard to really even remember them all. So I am what I am because of the students I had. And we got to do some great things. And the dramedy program had died out. It had been very active, I guess, in the 30s and 40s from listening to other people who were older than me. But drama had kind of died out, and I thought, well, I don't know anything, but I can do something. And we did a classic, Arsenic and Old Lace, that was open to all grades 9 through 12. And I thought, well, I'll try. And so I advertised, and there were, I think for that, there were 12 major roles. And I had the room all set up in the AV room for tryouts, and it was 7:30, and I was sitting there waiting, and I was all organized, and no one came. And I thought, well, okay, then they just don't want to do this. And so I got up to go, and 12 seniors walked into the room, and everybody got a part. And it was a classic, and it went extremely well. I am forever grateful to all the drama students. We have had so much fun, hard work, but so much fun together. And
I did the 1-act play for competition in the fall, and then they asked me to do up to a 3-act play every spring. The first plays that I did were all Carol Burnett sketches, and it's something that I've had a student come back now and ask me to do it now as community theater, because he would love to see it around the 4th of July one of these years, or even down at the movie theater, actually put on something like that. So I started overworking, trying to do all of that, and the speech season started the day after Christmas. It ended on my son's birthday almost every year, between December 26th to April 24th, almost every year. And then try to do the plays in there too. Pretty soon we discovered that there was no way I could put on the plays, because we soon had baseball and golf and track and then extra wrestling and everything else. So I was losing kids left and right, and we were having a really tough time finding practice time. By then, probably about 2007 to 2009, somewhere in there, we started having practices at 7 o'clock in the morning for the one-act play. It was the only time we could do it because of football and volleyball, and I had kids in both. And that took a few kids away, not many of them. They wanted the one-act play contest. We have gone to state twice since I've been here. We took third. The top two went to state for years. We took third probably 10 times in the 18 years I was here. Big plays. I did not believe that any kid who didn't want to be in the play couldn't find a part. So I started out doing everything and having 20 plus kids in a play. Only grades 9 through 12. There was only 1 year where I actually asked an 8th grader to, or more than one 8th grader because we were short. There were a couple plays where we had 100 props and costume changes, and this is a one-act play. It's a concentrated amount of talent. By the end, I had student directors that I could not have done without, like Madeline Larson, unbelievable. She was fantastic. Didn't really want to be in the plays as much as she wanted to be back set. And I trained other kids. Other kids did the costuming, the makeup. I didn't even have to do makeup at the end. It was fantastic because they all took care of each other because we started them young. But the kids are talented. The kids are smart. There is nothing better than speech or drama and the performing arts, music. As far as I'm concerned, to get kids a niche, to get them exposure in the state besides sports. But like I told you, my kids were in everything. So when they went to a competition, I have kids still to this day from other towns that know who I am, know my kids, know my son, everything else because of speech and drama. Wow. And it's a small world because of it. It really is.
That's phenomenal.
And I loved it. I loved it so much.
The school would not be the school without its staff. The staff of our school has many responsibilities, such as cleaning, managing the school, teaching students, and providing food. Here are a few of many great students and staff who have supported the school over the years.
John Roberts, he came to Hettinger in 1939 as superintendent and passed away in the middle of my junior year in 1963. At his whole time he was superintendent, and I just, he's a tough disciplinarian. There was no crap going on, and he was very big into athletics. He wanted to hire the best coaches that were available. They say he got Paul Roach right out of Black Hills State, and he went on to NFL fame, So, and the same with Dwayne Holly and whatever else. And my high school coach, Jerry Peterson, came right out of Valley City. So even if they didn't have a lot of coaching experience, if they had the reputation, he wasn't afraid to sign them. So he was quite the guy. He was very well known and very personable. I think I told you earlier, at least when I was in junior high, that's when the honor roll started. He'd come in and he'd ask, we were all in one big room then, and how many made the honor roll, and you'd stand up, and then he came around and shook everybody's hand. That's a neat touch, as a kid going, yeah, the superintendent shook my hand. So Gordon Ranke then, he came on as the principal in 1946, and then my senior year then, after Mr. Roberts passed away, he became the superintendent, and he was superintendent then from 63 to, he passed away in 81. Good friend of mine.
Okay.
When I came back here in 78, he was the superintendent, and worked real close with him. And then after he became superintendent in 64, then Erling Dahl was next in line, and he was here for 26 years as the principal, and then he became the superintendent in 1981 or two, thereabouts. I think we spent 1 year in the interim, and then he became our superintendent after that. So the athletic complex on Airport Road, that was named after him. July 5th of 1997, we dedicated that to him. He was still alive at the time, and his family came home and just for his many years of service to the Hettinger School. It was named, we'd already named the gym the Roberts Ranke Auditorium, so he was next in line, I guess, in longevity.
Okay.
Vida Richardson, she came here in the 1920s. She spent 49 years in our system, as an elementary teacher, and then later she became the elementary principal. But 39 years she gave us before she retired. And then Norm Smith came along in about 1960, retired in 88. Spent many years as our band and choir director, and then he became the junior high principal, and served in that capacity his last years then. And I think he might have done in later years, maybe like the kindergarten music. He loved the elementary kids and whatever. So, I started as junior high principal, but I was thinking that it was elementary and junior high later on. But he gave us a lifetime.
It's been neat being able to come back. Graduating in '98, there were some staff that were still here in '07 when I started that I had as a student. But a lot of the staff that I remember, there's a lot of them. It's not just being affiliated with sports, just not just the coaches. Mrs. Howe in her science room, she was a teacher that had high expectations, but yet she had fun with us. Kept everybody, made us all accountable. One of the funniest things is going into junior high is the first time I ever had Mrs. Howe, and back in those days, if you got mail through the U.S. Postal Service, it was kind of exciting. Today kids probably don't get very excited about that. But I remember it was right after the 4th of July, going into 7th grade, I got a letter from the school. It's like, hey, what's going on? And it was a homework assignment from Mrs. Howe. We haven't even started school yet, and she already had a homework assignment for us. So she set the tone right away. You guys are going to work in here. But yet we had a lot of fun with Miss Howe. And, she took us places. I think of English department, Mr. Moen was a blast. Taught us a lot of philosophy stuff, had a lot of good discussions with Mr. Moen. Mrs. Bonnie Smith, did great things in the English department and with drama. Probably one of the most rewarded coaches in the drama history, probably in the state, with what she was able to do with one-act play. But her classes were always pushing you. Mr. Wills in science class, he was a great teacher. We had Mr. Morris in social studies, Mr. Erickson. Of course, Mr. Erickson's still here today, and Mr. Burwick is still here today. So just that turnover. We had Mrs. Moen as a librarian. She was great to work with in there and doing research. And if you're lucky enough to be a librarian too, working with the kids and whatnot. But even, I guess, a lot of that's been, I'm talking high school, junior high, but, even going back into the elementary, Mrs. Arndorfer today, when she started, when I had her, she was Mrs. Heidecker. She's been here for a long time, kind of set that tone in kindergarten, does a great job. Mrs. Buckmeyer in first, some other names that were here for a long time when I was a kid, but weren't, by the time I was in high school, were gone, was like Mrs. Petz, Mrs. Wanda Petz. She was a great second grade teacher. Mrs. McLaughlin in third grade. Boy, she did great work with us. Mrs. Elbert turned into Miss Harper when she got married. I had her as a fifth grade teacher. Miss Clement down there. Of course, you guys, the people today know Miss Clement for her storytelling and stuff in the community. So.
Did you know that you'd always wanted to be a teacher?
No, I didn't. No, I wasn't for sure. When I first went away to college, I was a music major, and I did end up minoring in music and did teach music down in a country school when I wasn't here in Hettinger. But halfway through, I decided I always liked kids and I always liked working with kids, so that was what made up my mind for me. But in later years, I was also a storyteller. That's what I tell people I really became when I grew up, was a storyteller. This is what I'd always wanted to be doing. And I did a lot of work with storytelling and students in the schools. In fact, many of my students were wonderful storytellers.
How long have you taught?
I was 34 years altogether. I retired in 2002. It's been 19 years since I retired, but my whole career was 34 years long. Mm-hmm. So it was the olden days when I taught. When I taught, women teachers wore dresses. You did not wear slacks. You never even thought of wearing jeans. You always wore dresses, even when it was 20 below zero and you're outside on recess duty. And even as a student, girls wore dresses from first grade on. That was just the way it was.
Just, yeah, a great staff. Across the board, not that you liked every subject, just like kids today, you have classes you do and don't like, but, Hettinger, I think, has done a great job over the decades to having staff that are able to show the kids that they care and are here to ask questions and here to help as much as possible, so.
Well, John Butterfield was obviously an outstanding basketball player. I mean, he came in from farm kid coming out of Lodgepole, and I believe he started all 4 years. Just his height, his size. He was noted for his hook shot and whatever, and so we won the state championship when he was a junior, and then his senior year he broke a finger, got pinned to the rim against Beach in the regional, but he was a super athlete, from through the discus and shot, I think, and in track, heck of a baseball player. He pitched most of the time. It's pretty intimidating, 6'5" coming off that mound. So, and then he went on. I was bat boy for the town team for several years, and when he was playing on that. Football, he was always all conference and football also. And I guess in girls track, Rhonda Viken was probably the one that scored more points than anyone else in her career through here. She was in the dashes, sprinter, and placed several years in the state tournament. And Willard Solberg came in 1945 and I think was here till 52, but he had a string of great basketball teams and football teams also, and I think at least twice within that span they went to the state tournament. In 46 I think they took consolation, and I think they went again in maybe 51. So he was an outstanding coach, and then he eventually went into administration. Dwayne Hawley then came in the middle 50s as the head football and the head basketball coach, and that's when we won the state tournament in 57. He was the coach, and he left in just before I got into high school. My 8th grade year was his last year, and then he went on to St. Mary's of Bismarck and coached them into several state tournaments. Had a good reputation that way. Paul Roach was only here 2 years, but this was his first stop, and from here he went on to Dickinson High, and then he was a grad assistant at UND, and then he made it into the NFL. Then he coached in Green Bay, part of the Orange Crush in Denver back in the 70s, Oakland, and maybe one other NFL team. And then he came back to the University of Wyoming as the athletic director and head football coach, and I think he was the oldest athletic director in the nation before he retired, but after a couple of years he gave up the football and continued on as athletic director. But so he had a reputation. And
when I started teaching here, I had almost all of my teachers were still here. So when I got here, it was kind of interesting to see what they were like behind the scenes. And I stole a lot of what I do now from them and from past teachers that I had, like my who's who and where in the world are from my 5th grade teacher, and some of the techniques and projects we do are from my old teachers as well. So a lot of them were still around, and some still are, but yeah, good teachers.
My dad was the auto teacher. He originally was a truck driver at Osted's, and the superintendent had come down and said, Mr. Swihovic, we would love for you to be the auto teacher and start our program out. And he's like, well, I don't know anything about teaching. And went back to school, got a certification, and started teaching auto. When they first started, it was in the old junior high building, which housed the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders at the time. I believe it was a several stories building. He was in the basement of that building, which was the auto class, and I believe there was a small little gym that was also there. When that building burnt down in the 80s, he was then moved over to the ag, where the ag department is now. And after a few years with that insurance money, then they built the red building out and back where auto is now held. So it's kind of been an interesting, interesting little factor of Hettinger as far as the auto, how it started, and the fact that it's still going on is amazing.
We did have an elementary principal, Mr. Smith. The high school principal was Mr. Dahl, and I remember he would just look at you and you were almost like, oh my God, what did I do wrong? Okay. And then we had Mr. Rinke, and then we had a lot of different staff members that would just do junior high and just do high school, where now we kind of have to use them for both areas. The one that kind of sticks out with me was Mrs. Ginther. She was a social studies teacher. When she first came, we had different history classes, and she was the first one to teach psychology. And I thought that was pretty cool, so I ended up actually getting a psychology minor. But Mrs. Ginther was kind of the one that I kind of remember as. Another one was Mrs. Fitch. I wasn't much on reading, like some of the kids are currently as well. And I had to have an English class, so I took a reading class. And it actually turned out to be a pretty cool class. I thought reading turned out to be pretty good. So.
Now we have some assorted stories and topics that do not fall under any general category. Here is some of our assorted stories.
High school days, now we listened to KOMA radio station out of Oklahoma City that played all the rock bands and rock and roll tunes back then, the popular ones. And there are also several bands that would advertise on KOMA, and several of them showed up to play at the Hettinger Armory back then. And several played in Lemon also, so that was another spot to go, travel down to Lemon. Okay. So yeah, that was a big deal. Used to be barn dances over south of Scranton. I didn't attend those. Some of my rougher classmates made that trip. I wasn't one to get in little scuffles with neighboring towns, so the drive-in theater was a big activity back then.
And where was that located?
Just east of town, a couple miles.
Okay, so right
now there's a B dealer, but the original projection building is still there.
Okay.
And then he's added a couple machine shed type things or whatever. But okay. Yeah, so that was very popular on weekends. Okay. And then I mentioned the sheep shed where they previously played basketball. That became a roller skating rink. And as far as ice skating, I never did. I sold my ice skates in 6th grade. I fell a couple times, and a kid sitting on the bank didn't have any, and I gave him a good deal and never looked back. But roller skating I picked up. That was okay. But then the town had probably 4 or 5 neighborhood rinks that they flooded, and we haven't had one since until this year when they put that one down by the band shell. Oh. Which it didn't work out because of the weather, but yeah. But we used to have neighborhood skating rinks several places in town. Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. So that occupied some time, and then the movie theater was a big deal in town too. Mm-hmm. As a grade school kid, it cost me 12 cents to go to a movie. And I suppose popcorn was 5 cents. Yeah, 12 cents. So I could afford a lot of movies then, but although, you know, 12 cents then is a lot different than today. Other than that, you know, nowadays every kid from 9th grade up has their own vehicle. That wasn't the case back in the 60s. I think my senior year, I'm not even sure if I had a car then. I was a junior in college before I had a car at UND. Otherwise, I was catching rides with somebody from the area. Yeah, bought a little old Nash Rambler. So, I mean, in high school, I took typing. They don't offer typing anymore, do they?
No.
Yeah,
it's
computer.
It's
what's it called? The keyboarding. Yeah. So that do make a difference.
Fantastic.
And we had to use encyclopedias for research. Now they're pretty much obsolete, right?
Yep.
You just Google such and such, and I do that on my phone. You know, I'd never thought I'd see that day, but they answer any question you have.
Any question.
You know, some of the activities, one of the questions talked about activities we don't, or organizations we no longer have. And one I could think of was the Letterman's Club. And that was just the men's. We didn't have the girls' basketball and volleyball back then. But, you know, once you got that Letterman's jacket, that was a big deal. Your first letter, you could order a Letterman's jacket, leather sleeves and all. And then you'd get the H put on your jacket. And then every time you lettered in a sport, you'd get another bar to put on there, and so on and so forth. So we actually had a Letterman's Club. I don't recall what all we did or if there were any dues, but yeah, a Letterman's Club.
Wow.
And on the girls' side was the GAA, Girls Athletic Association. And that was a big deal. I mean, back in I remember seeing, and I'm sure it went back into the 50s with Gladys Carlson, but at least 50, 60 girls lined up in the big gym, you know, for a picture. You know, and that went by the wayside. And I'm not sure what all they did either. You know, if they got together once a month and, you know, did volleyball or what, I don't know. But that's what it was called. The drama club was in existence when I was in high school, and that, again, kind of went by the wayside. Yeah, I mean, we had lots of good staff members. I liked all my teachers. You know, I was very fortunate. You know, I started first grade in that new elementary wing, you know, and there was 2 teachers for every grade, you know. And so on one side, actually through the first 6 grades, but there's a teacher here that everybody wanted, and the ones over here were a little shaky for one reason or another. But I was fortunate. The first 6 grades, I got the teacher that I wanted. And I'm very thankful for that. You know, on the other side, there was one teacher, a single lady, taught 2nd grade for years, and she was tough on kids. You know, didn't bother her at all to hold them back. But anyway, when my brother, we moved back from New England. My brother was 2nd grade. He started school in New England, and he had her then. Just hated her, just hated school, you know. So he was gone for several days, and the teacher finally called my mom to see where Larry was at. Well, he's gone to school every day. Well, what he did is, we had a little old shed out back by the alley, and he went there and spent the whole day till he saw the neighbor kids coming home. He came out of the shed, walked in the house just like he'd been in school all day. So eventually, you know, obviously he was forced to go back in the classroom, but he took a couple, 3 days off. So, but, well, you talked about the dances. Some of our dances were in the school, but the majority of our high school dances, you know, whether it be, you know, seniors or juniors or whatever was involved, were in the basement of the Masonic Temple. across the alley. Okay, but you had to be careful because they had these pillars coming down in between, so you didn't want to get wrapped around one of those. So. You had to be careful with your 2 steps, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. And that also held the prom banquet for many years was held in the basement. You know, and the Eastern Star. That was a women's organization along with the Masons. Okay, and they're the ones that would provide that. You know, they had the kitchen area. They had all their own specially marked plates and cups and all that, and so that's where the banquet was held for many years.
What kinds of things did students do for fun when you went to school?
Well, you know, it's kind of funny because kids always say there's nothing to do. At the time that I remember in junior high, there would always be the Girl Scouts would have a dance. They would have like a fundraiser every other Friday at the Armory. So there was like little junior high dances, and then there was also the bowling alley was going strong. We had 2 rec centers at that time. The current place where the insurance is right now with Western Edge, that used to be a rec center. And then we had a rec center on the end of Main Street where Prairie Rose Floral is. So we had 2 rec centers. We had an outdoor theater where the Edwards Honey is right along the highway. And then we had another theater where the credit union is. Unfortunately, that one burnt down. So we would go to the indoor theater on, I think it was Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. The outdoor theater was certain nights of the week as well. But the only thing that I remember about the outdoor theater was it was right along the highway, so cars would be backed up because you couldn't start the movie until it got dark. And people, of course, would slide in somebody's trunk always and kind of sneak into the movie. We did not have cell phones. I know that sounds weird. I still remember as a sophomore, we got a thing called cable TV. Before that, we had 3 channels. So then we would start to maybe watch MTV and some of the other things like that. But it was still the same thing, Anna. There would be like, there's nothing to do. We had way more to do. But the thing that I really remember was we were always doing something outside. You know, if we went to a park, there would be guys, whether they were wrestlers or not, basketball players, we'd play basketball if it was that season. If it was football season, we'd go to another park in town and we'd play football. And in the summer, we'd always play baseball. So it was always something to do athletically or physically. Kids would play night games, kick the can. I think you guys call it mouse and cat now or whatever it is. We call it the ditch. Would that happen? Whatever that was. But yeah, there was always something that there was always something to do, but people still made the same comment, you know, there's nothing to do. So, but kids still got in trouble, kind of like they do now. So,
are there any other stories you would like to share from your experiences in school or experience as a teacher?
Oh, wow. Well, I still tell this story a lot. You know, it's important that kids start to look down the road. I remember walking out of graduation, 1984. It was like May 25th. I walked out of the school, and I thought, wow, this is it. Now what am I going to do? I had no clue. And about 2 weeks before school started, I decided that Dickinson might be kind of a cool place to go. So I didn't do all of I did take the ACT. Unfortunately, that was the day that we, after we lost a playoff game, still did okay on my ACT. But I think that the biggest thing that I remember was how unprepared I was, and luckily things worked out well for me. That's one thing I remember specifically. I guess in school, I just remember, you know, a lot of kids around. We had some kids that got in trouble a lot. We had a lot of fun in the locker rooms, which probably got us in a little bit of trouble as well, just like kids do now. But I just remember that there was a lot of you know, there was a lot of respect that went around, and I think it was a pretty good educational experience that I ended up having.
All right. Well, that is all the questions. Is there anything else you'd like to add or say?
No, I think this is awesome that you guys are doing this. It's cool what Mr. Janikowski and you guys are doing in terms of, you know, all the different things with the school and communicating. So kudos to you guys, and this is really cool.
All right.
What did kids do for fun when you were in school?
So when I was in school, things for fun, we had, of course, the bowling alley. So at lunchtime, we would hustle down to the bowling alley and try to get a few, you know, games in, like the KISS pinball machine in particular was a pretty, you know, hot item back then. Get a little microwaved chuck wagon and a can of pop or a bag of chips, and of course then rush back to school. I would say the things that we mostly did was on Main Street. We would gather together and drag Main. So we would drag Main, and then pretty soon the cars, pickups would stop, and we'd be throwing football across Main Street, or frisbees, or playing catch across Main Street, and really just utilizing Main Street as that one focal area where we had just kind of all congregated, got together, and drank Mountain Dew and spit out seeds and had a good time. A lot of, we had a theater which had a balcony. It was a huge theater, awesome. So it was movies on Friday nights. After the movie, you'd hit the rec center, and at the rec center they had pool, they had foosball, they had Pac-Man, or you cross the street over to the Cozy Hut for fries with gravy. And it was a lot of just doing that, and maybe ditch with our cars once in a while. You know, I think nowadays they call it cat and mouse.
Oh yeah.
You know, kind of the same thing.
Just again, a lot of the field trips is what sticks out in my mind. You know, Mr. Wills was the science teacher. I remember him taking us up to the North Park, the Theodore Roosevelt Park. And again, just the opportunity to get off of campus. You know, being students, we were always up to something, you know, not bad stuff, but always, you know, how far can you push this or push that, or just to have fun, you know. And the teachers were great, you know. So that was always a fun trip to do. You know, Mrs. Howe took us she always took us to Logging Camp Ranch. You know, we used the classes ahead of us always used to get to go down. She'd take them down to Bear Butte, but somewhere along the line, there's a class out there. And it's not the class of 98. It was a class before us somewhere. They wrecked that because they went down there and they got a little too crazy with their shenanigans. So Mrs. Howe stopped taking kids down to Bear Butte. You know, the spillway thing, that's always kind of been a big deal. I don't know if this year's senior class is going to do anything at the spillway, but, you know, painting the spillway. I don't know when that tradition started, but it was definitely something that we took part of in the 90s, and, you know, doing that.
We were a pretty good class. We had some wild ones, but we didn't have any crazy, you know, senior stories or senior skip days or pranks that we did. But I just look around at some of the kids now, and it's pretty much the same group of kids. You had farm kids, you had town kids, you have this sport kid, you have this sport, this organization, the non-sports kids, the drama kids, the science kids. So not a whole lot has changed. It's just what they wear, and obviously cell phones. I mean, we didn't even have Wi-Fi at school when I was in. It was all, you know, you had to be connected to the internet and everything with a cord. So just the differences in that with cell phones and all the social media and stuff is the really big change.
What kind of things did students do for fun when you went to school?
Students do for fun. We had an hour-long noon hour. Choir and band were taught during 4th and 5th hour. And so while band kids were in band, the choir kids were at lunch and vice versa. So we had an hour to do things, and that oftentimes got us in trouble. And driving around out in the country, getting stuck and being late, that still happens. So once again, what goes around comes around. But just driving around with friends, that used to be the thing, is to meet at Main Street during school or after school. We didn't have cell phones, so you couldn't like text each other, or snap each other, or look where each other are on a creepy map. But we would actually have to go out and find each other, or call somebody's house and be like, is so-and-so home? Which doesn't happen anymore. So a lot more social interaction and like going to see people and going to hang out with people at different places in the parks and stuff. So I see a big difference that way.
Okay, if you had yourself as a student or athlete, would you have liked you?
If I had myself as a student or athlete, would I like what I saw? No, I didn't learn how to study or do schoolwork very efficiently until college. That's when I got my freshman year in college. I was like, whoa, I actually have to study for a test, and I have to put effort into this. And it wasn't a knock on my former teachers. It was just way, way more difficult and more asked of you. So I was a good kid. I was a great kid. I never got in trouble, ever. I was always the one that was with people that got in trouble, but I never did anything wrong. But as an athlete, I think I would. I worked really hard and was a good team player and put a lot of work into it, too. I had really good teammates. Everybody got along, so there was never any friction.
And when I started school, there was no hot lunch program. Everybody went home at noon for lunch. And if you were a country kid, you brought your lunch to school and you ate it on your desk in the room. And then when that second part of the building was, then they put in the cafeteria, and then they had a hot lunch program.
Mm-hmm. Then they moved me to what had been the old building, the one that burned. And I was in the room that was immediately below the big assembly. And it was kind of off by itself, so we could do some wonderful things again. And I cleaned it all up and fixed it up, and that was the room, one of the rooms that after the building burned. Everything from the assembly fell right through my roof, but the floor of the assembly above, and that room was just ruined. I remember the evening of the fire quite well. Someone came running up the street and to tell Norm, my husband had been the music teacher band and choir teacher for about 17 years, and then he went into administration. And they said, Mr. Smith, there's a fire. And when I was teaching, it was like really rare that we sat down to a family dinner. There was no time. We were all four of us involved all the time at school. But that night I had made fried chicken and mashed potatoes, corn, and I think it was apple crisp. I can't even remember it. And don't ask me why, but I just turned everything off and we left and ran down to school and watched the building burn. There was nothing that anyone could do much about it.
My favorite murder mystery of all time was called Murder by Death. I will never, ever forget Josh Robb. Didn't want to be in a play, but he said he would do it. He lay on a desk with a knife in his back the entire play until the last line. Then he sat up and said his line, and he got a Best Actor award. Because they honestly thought it was a mannequin. They didn't realize that he was actually supposed to play a corpse.
I'll tell you a story, one story that kind of sticks out in my mind. I had a young man that wrestled for me, and he wrestled for me for 4 years of high school. And this is a great story. And this young man wrestled as a freshman and never won a match. Wrestled as a sophomore and never won a match. Wrestled as a junior and never won a match. Wrestled as a senior and lost his first 21 matches. Then one night we had a duel over here and we were wrestling Bowman. He was a senior, so he got his opportunity to be in front of our home crowd, and man, we had crowds and crowds and crowds. And this young man walked out there and he won his first match ever. And I never heard that gym that loud. But what was the greatest experience and what was the greatest thing about it is that he had a group, he was on a very good wrestling team. Every single one of them ran out on the mat and they put him on his shoulders, carried him off that mat. He won 4 more times after that. He won 5 matches in his whole career. But the one thing about him is that in 4 years of wrestling, he never missed one wrestling practice. Not one. And so that is about as good as it gets.
Thank you for watching our documentary about the history of Hettinger Public School. We hope you found this mini-series entertaining, informational, and fun to watch. Thank you to all the people who have spent their time on interviews this year and for all the viewers of our HPS uploads. Thank you for all your kind words and support, and thank you for this marvelous year.